What's up? What's happening from Capital One Arena today? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We even got the YouTube stream up. We brought the technical equipment. Tim and Shaq are here, but they're sitting off camera. Which is kind of, I feel like it looks like I've absconded you guys over yonder. We are in the concourse, so if you want to come down to Capital One early and hang out and say what's up at commercial break, we'd love to see you. But just know it wasn't my decision to stick Tim and Shaq at a table with no tablecloth where it looks like they're on an island on their own. Alas, sitting down with me at the table today, Ava Wallace a little bit later. She's going to come up from the media room before the game to talk about the end of Bilal Coulibaly's season for the Wizards. He has a wrist injury and has been ruled out for the year, so we'll talk to Ava about that. Also talk about it with Dave Johnson in his usual spot at 6:15 tonight. But we start, Anthony, back in the Navy Yard studio. Well, first, I would like to know, is Russell okay? Because at the end of his show, I guess he was rushing to get out because he didn't realize I was here, and he seemed very flustered. And I just want to make sure that Chris is okay because I worry about his well-being.
Yeah, I think he's okay. I was trying to calm him down because we don't want a flustered rooster.
Yeah, never.
For real. Yeah.
That'd be bad. We can't have a flustered rooster. So, Chris, if you're still in that studio, I'm sorry that nobody let you know that I am here, not there. But I'm here, not there. So take your time, pal. And hopefully I'll see you over here later as a big group of us are going to be hanging out here at Cap One tonight. But, Anthony, in all earnest to start the show, it is a Vibe Check Tuesday, and I have a question that I would like to run through the audience and take calls on at 301-230-0980. And that question is this. There was a large group of folks who were either lukewarm or straight up upset about the hiring of Dan Quinn. Now, there were, of course, people, it should be stated, not to be hot takey and try to push it all in one direction and pretend like everyone was super upset with the Dan Quinn hire. That's just simply not the case. There was a large group of people, though, that were lukewarm, I think, on the Dan Quinn hire. And then he started hiring his staff, and people are like, well, shoot, this is pretty good. And then we all of a sudden, tons of these free agents that have signed in Washington that people are pretty psyched about, including the biggest one in Bobby Wagner, have ties to the staff, and in Wagner's case, DQ himself. And so my question for the audience, the vibe I would like to check here on this Tuesday at 301-230-0980 is, has your opinion of Dan Quinn changed? Are you now more excited about Dan Quinn being here than you were when he was hired and you're like, but the Atlanta debacle, but the 28-3, but he got fired, but the Green Bay game? Because all that stuff is still true, and I think that obviously how Dan performs in the fall is going to be pretty important. But I will say for me, this has been validating in many ways, not of my own opinion, but validating of the idea that he was the right guy for the job because of his connections and because of his experience. Because he is someone who is so well respected in the league. And, you know, when that is your defense of a hire, when that is the general theory of your argument, it's nice to see that play out in a way where it's like, okay, yeah, you might agree with that thing, the fact, because there's no doubt, even the people that disliked or were lukewarm on Quinn would be like, okay, cool, he's respected, but what does that mean? What do you mean that this is going to, how does this actually help the football team? And now I think we've seen how it helps the football team. Because for the first time ever, maybe not ever, but close to ever, because back when Washington was good in the 90s, and the early 90s and late 80s especially, free agency wasn't a thing. Like, free agency literally didn't exist for most of Washington's success in their franchise history. It hits in the, I believe it was like 93-ish when NFL free agency first happens. And obviously Washington was starting to decline at that point. Ultimately, Snyder buys the team in 99, and we know how that went. But outside of, hey, we're going to give this free agent a whole boatload of money, maybe more than anyone else would, we're going to pay the Washington tax, players want to come here. And when you hire not only when you have DQ, super respected, so well liked by some of the individual players who have joined him here, from Dante Fowler, who literally wants to play for DQ for the rest of his life and has from college to the pros, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz coming from Dallas, but also guys like Bobby Wagner coming from Seattle, and Dan Quinn in Seattle and being like, yeah, no, I want to play for that dude again. I think that you're seeing those guys, plus, hey, he hired Anthony Lynn, and that gets you Austin Eckler. You hire Tom Donatel, and that gets you possibly one of your starting corners in Michael Davis yesterday. That you hire Cliff Kingsbury, that gets you Zach Ertz to be a primo A-plus leader on your offense. And so when it comes to the culture, like, all these coaches have their guys in the rooms to be able to echo them and to be able to go to other players and tell them how they work, because these guys who are some of the best available leaders, and we can talk about the playing side, obviously, but on a leadership and environment building, culture building, if you want to go there, level, what you see is, in many ways, the Dan Quinn effect. Now, it's not totally DQ, obviously. Adam Peters is phenomenal, and you've seen some people with some Peters ties come in as well, but you've also just seen Peters' ability to get the job done, and I think that's worth mentioning here, right? He is the general manager. He is the one who's ultimately got to sign off on the acquisitions. He's the one who's got to make them happen with the agents from a price standpoint, make sure the cap is managed, all those types of things. So of course AP matters, but Bobby Wagner's not here if it's not for Dan Quinn. There's just no doubt in my mind. And so to see them rebuild this roster with Dan Quinn guys, or coaches that Dan Quinn hired guys, to see it come together in a way that feels like they can be competitive in 2024 if they get any modicum of decent quarterback play. And if they get quarterback right, should be competitive for years to come. Obviously, that's always the case with the number 2 pick. But they're already starting to see the pieces of the foundation come together. Has your opinion changed at all on Dan Quinn? That's the question. We're going to spend a lot of this hour on it. 301-230-0980. It's a Vibe Check Tuesday. We'll also take a peek at the YouTube comments as well if you're watching the stream at the Team 980. Always remind you that if you miss any part of the show, if you like this question, for instance, but you are at the end of your commute, God bless you, you're home before 4:15, good for you. One, you could go inside and turn on the YouTube stream or the free Odyssey app and keep listening, or God forbid, if you have an old school radio in your house with an AM or FM dial, that'd be cool. But you can also catch the show on demand, and that is through your favorite podcast app. You just search The Hoffman Show. Anthony will have this up by the end of the hour. It would be cool if he could get it up before, but we do have to do the show before he can put it on demand. That is, unfortunately, how that works. So 301-230-0980 is the phone number. The question, has your opinion post-free agency, seeing what the Commanders have done, has your opinion changed on Dan Quinn? Your calls next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. That is, of course, the Team 980 listener line. You can call that no matter how you are listening, whether that is on the free Odyssey app, on your radio, on YouTube. It's the same phone number. It's the same show. It all goes to the same place. I got some good YouTube comments already flowing in on our question of the day, which on this Vibe Check Tuesday is, has free agency reshaped how you think of the Dan Quinn hire? Because a lot of people were very not super excited about Dan Quinn. We got Smiling Hard Hat, great handle. My concern was hiring a defensive coach, but I truly feel like he's become someone I'm excited about. Eddie says, I'll admit I got caught up in the whole Ben Johnson coaching search, attempted acquisition, but ultimately I feel good and potentially great with the hire of DQ. James Taylor, Vibe Check. Yes, I was all in for Ben Johnson, but seeing Adam Peters' reaction towards him on the team website confirmed that he was the guy all along. I'm riding with DQ now. So appreciate those. Keep them rolling in. We'll read a few more as we go, but let's start our calls, the Vibe Check on the phones, 301-230-0980. God, we got a lot of calls. Let's start off with Daryl in Columbia. Daryl, thanks for calling. You're on the Team 980.
Hey, Craig. Yes, thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh yeah. Hey, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, man, he's really opened my eyes, because I was for McDonald, and Dan Quinn, I was like disappointed with the defense with Dallas, with Atlanta, with blowing the 20-3 lead, and just hearing all that in my ear. But what I've been really impressed with this guy is Adam Peters. His relationship with him, and how cool they are, and how they're working strategically together. And then all of the coaches want to coach with him. All of the coaches are laying down their egos, and they want to work with this guy. And then all the players that you talk to, they all want to play for him, man. It's just amazing that my whole attitude has changed. But I'm ready for the season to start right now.
Daryl, appreciate the call, and I think that a lot of people are on that same exact plane with you. I think the thing about the coaches too that's really fascinating, and talking to some people over in the building, and just kind of getting a general sense of things and how they are over there. When you have a star-studded staff, it can go multiple ways, and ultimately this could still go the way of Carolina, where there's too many cooks in the kitchen, especially offensively. They don't ever have a cohesive vision. This guy's pulling this way, this guy's pulling that way. And if things don't go well, people are going to pull harder. It's March 19th, so nothing is set in stone yet. But all you can do is judge it within the context of where we are right now. And the thing that I'm hearing right now from in the building is these guys like Anthony Lynn, like Cliff Kingsbury, like Brian Johnson even, a young guy who hasn't gotten his shot yet, but especially Kingsbury and Lynn, these dudes aren't there to get a head coaching job. If Cliff gets an offer a year, 2 years from now because things are going great with this rookie quarterback, then, would he listen? Probably. I don't know whether he would or he wouldn't. But he's focused on right now being the offensive coordinator here. Anthony Lynn is what can I do to help here right now? Because and the part of the reasoning is, and why you haven't heard a ton from these guys, and Cliff made this pretty apparent, I think, at his opening press conferences, is they don't want to do interviews. They're not trying to get their names out there. They just want to work. They work, they show up, they do their stuff, they go home. They're not doing a lot of press stuff. They're not doing nonsense. They're not at the combine schmoozing. They're at work in Ashburn, zooming into meetings with prospects that cross their position group, but they're not out in Indy at the bars networking themselves, which is what a lot of coaches do in Indy, which is smart for their career advancement. But these guys are I don't care about that. I'm here to work for Washington right now, and I'm here to work for Dan Quinn. And I think that's really important, and that we've already seen, and now I think you're seeing the player side of it too in free agency. More of your calls, 301-230-0980. 888-267-0980. Let's go to Keith in Clinton. Keith, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
Hey, good. You have really gotten better the more you're doing your show. You've gotten really, really good. And so I was the same way. I'm the same. So I was thinking the same thing on DQ. I'm like, okay. And the last caller said the exact same thing I was going to say. So I'm not even going to repeat all of that. But I shouted when I thought about the Super Bowl. I shouted when I saw about how Dallas defense had to keep, that kept letting people get up 30 points and put 30 points on them. They had to score 34 to win. But I'm so excited about how he's pulling people and how people want to play for him, and they're going to go the extra mile for him. So that's the start right there. And just like you've gotten better, I'm hoping and praying that, okay, he's gotten better. He's learned each year that he's doing this. He's learned from his experience as a head coach when he was a head coach last time. And also he's learned some things from Dallas while he was with Dallas. I want to see his not just halftime adjustments, but that first drive adjustments. What adjustments are they going to make? These are the things that I really want to see in him now that's on my next board for him as far as that's concerned. But I'm saying, just like you've gotten so good at what you're doing now and how you do it, and I love listening to your show now. I'm hoping that, and you got to give him that chance. He's going to get better too, but I'm hoping that it's right now. I'm hoping he's reaching his peak right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate the kind words on how we've grown as a show, and obviously I appreciate the call on the opinions on DQ. And what I'll say is, like, one of the reasons I think I'm really high on DQ is actually very personal. I think philosophically, when it comes to like self-improvement and kind of the way we see the world and the way we see coaching, right? And I'm not talking about football strategy because I do have thoughts on that. Obviously, it'd be pretty hard to do this show without it, and I'd have to be pretty dense to not have picked up some thoughts about football philosophy covering the league for 10 years and for as intensively as I did for my 5 on the beat. And still, like, this is a pretty intensely NFL job, especially my version of it, this show where we are extremely NFL heavy, even by sports talk radio standards, and I also do the show with Logan. So, like, these things push me certain ways, but I think of it much more on, like, the general coaching philosophy. And this is where, again, like, I have some bias here, but I'm willing to admit it. The way Dan Quinn sees the world is very similar to the way I do, and I think it does allow for growth. And I'm only going down this path because Keith brought it up. But, like, you have to, one, be willing to be open-minded and keep 2 thoughts in your head at once. 1, I'm worthy to be here, and 2, I can get better. Because I think what happens is sometimes you long for a job, and whether it's an NFL head coaching job or, like, in my case, a daily radio show. Like, I was ready to do a daily radio show long before I got one. But when you get there, like, you have to have the humility to be like, okay, how can I get better at this? I'm going to get reps every single day, but how do I make the most of those to be introspective and go, can I actually improve? And that involves some identification skills. And this is where I think Dan's, like, 360 review that he's talked about is so essential. Like, one phrase that we both actually love a lot is keep the main thing the main thing. And so do you have the ability in the first place to identify the main thing before you actually keep it the main thing? And then how do you stay focused on the right things or the right thing, if you want to narrow it down to a main thing, as you go through your process? I think in-game coaching is the last step often because it is hard, and part of the reason it's really hard is also the same reason it's hard to develop players in the NFL. There aren't a lot of football games, and this is a lesson, frankly, that I learned in broadcast school, because if you want to go into play-by-play, it's really hard to do football play-by-play because there aren't a lot of games. Where, like, if you want to go practice basketball play-by-play, you can go to a high school any night of the week during basketball season, and you can find a game somewhere in your area, right? Multiple times a week, or if you want, I mean, there's 82 Wizards games. If you wanted to buy a seat in the 400s tonight, and you're a young broadcaster who wants to become the next Chris Miller or Mike Breen or Ian Eagle, you could go with your phone, because that's how we record things now, or a tape recorder, old school style. You could buy a cheap ticket in the 400s, and you could make a tape, practice, send it to a mentor, get feedback, whatever. And guess what? They play again on Thursday. There's 17 games in an NFL season. And the number of times that a key 2-minute drive comes up and you have to do the timeouts properly, or you have to think about, are we going to kick here? Are we going to do that? Like, those situations only come up so often. And if I was a head coach, I would actually play a ton of Madden. And I would put it on coach mode, and I would make myself do some game management stuff in the offseason. And so all of that to say, there are things that ultimately Dan Quinn is going to make mistakes on. There are things where there's clearly going to be areas for improvement. There's going to be situational things where he gets it wrong, where they go in. Keith talks about the first drive stuff, right? Like, are there going to be games where they go in with a game plan and the other team pulls a fast one? They thought they were throwing fastball. They throw a changeup. Team's not really ready. And the question is, how quickly do you adjust off of that? Like, those kinds of things are going to happen. But I think what I love so far and why I have faith that this program is on the right path is everybody's on the same page, pulling in the same direction. And in football, one of the philosophical things that I wholeheartedly believe is, while there are superior schematic ways to go about things, ways to attack certain areas of the field, ways to create advantages that are big and small, personnel, angles, whatever you want to talk about, whatever level of specificity. The number one thing that is most important is everybody's doing the same thing. You can have the best plan on paper that possibly could have existed. Perfect call against a perfect coverage, and all you got to do is go out there and execute it. And if you got one dude doing the wrong thing, that play's probably going to get messed up. And if you got 11 with an inferior plan, you're going to have ways to make everybody right. And that goes for your entire organization as well. Are you all pulling in the same direction? And in March, that's all we can ask for. We'll see what happens in September, October, November, December, and God willing, January and one day February. But for right now, they're all going the same way. And that is absolutely the DQ effect. More of your calls next. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Has your opinion on Dan Quinn changed since the hire, and especially since we've seen this free agent haul with so many ties to him and the staff that he's brought in? Your calls next.
The Commanders, NFL Prime.
301-230-0980 is our phone number. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on the free Odyssey app. Of course, the Team 980, which you can listen to in DC 980 AM, 106.7 HD2 FM, and on YouTube at the Team 980, where you'll see we are not in any of our usual locations, not the home studio, not the regular studio. Nope, we are at Capital One Arena, where tonight the Rockets are in town to take on the very, very banged-up Wizards. Tyus Jones is banged up. Coulibaly's season is over. All the bigs are hurt. We'll see who can ultimately suit up tonight for Washington, and we'll talk about it all with Ava Wallace and Dave Johnson on set later in the show. But Commanders, for now, as we take your calls on a Vibe Check Tuesday, and the question is, has your opinion on Dan Quinn changed? Obviously, a lot of folks were lukewarm to upset about the hire, but seeing how the staff he's hired has helped him bring in such a really lauded free agent class, has that changed your opinion? 301-230-0980. Let's go to Kurt. Kurt, your table, as usual, is ready, sir. How are you?
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, bro.
I have to admit, I was all in on Ben Johnson, because, I was hearing about him as, going all the way back to last year before the ownership even changed and Rivera was still here and all of that. I was hearing the name, so the more I kept hearing it, the more I got sold on it. But then, after I thought about it, I'm like, all this hype about Ben Johnson was mainly coming from outside of the building. It wasn't really coming from in the building. It was coming from all the, the Adam Schefters and all of that, making these predictions about where he's going to end up and blah, 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 So when Ben Johnson pulled out, I wasn't, totally disappointed by it, because I was telling a couple buddies of mine that it just seemed like the Commanders, Adam Peters in particular, had an infatuation with Dan Quinn. And I kept hearing his name, not directly, but indirectly. Dan Quinn. So I said, hey, I think Dan Quinn is the guy. And they're like, nah, you crazy. I said, no, I think Dan Quinn's going to be the guy. And then once Ben Johnson pulled out, everybody started looking at other names. I said, no, it's going to be Quinn. And then once Quinn was hired, I actually was cool with it. And it took a couple of steps up after that, because once I started hearing people talk about him, and I heard Logan Paulson talking about him, and all these other professionals in the field talking about him, nobody had anything negative to say about him. Okay, and I thought about, I think like everybody else, the Super Bowl meltdown and the last game, in the playoffs with Dallas and all of that. But I think the Super Bowl meltdown fell more in the lap of Shanahan than it did DQ, in my opinion. Okay, and then I think, that playoff game, that was one game. If you take his overall work, full body work on defense, the Cowboys were strong defensively. So I felt good about it, And then one thing that Logan had mentioned, and you had mentioned also, about how DQ reached out to Logan and asked him, what could he do better?
Right.
And he was just very open and transparent and wanting to improve. And that impressed me that much more. And then it went up another notch once he started putting the staff together and seeing the chemistry there and players coming in, wanting to be with these guys. And like one caller mentioned before, how these coaches wanted to coach with him, and how you mentioned they don't really want to be head coaches. They just want to work and be with Dan Quinn. And that took it up another notch. So I'm totally satisfied with it now. I wouldn't say it was a 180 from when at first, but
it sounds like it's been a build, for sure.
It's been going up.
Yeah, for sure. Kurt, as always, appreciate the call, man. Thank you. I think that your vision, I think, of that probably mirrors quite a number of folks. And I think, the Ben Johnson thing, he was the number one candidate, and this was, in the eyes of many people, the number one job going into the process. But there's a reason the process exists. We don't just accept what it is without doing the work. And certainly, forget us in the media, we don't get a chance to sit down and interview these guys and be like, yeah, well, that's my number one candidate, because we don't have jobs. All we have is opinions. But these teams sure do. They spend a lot of money, whether it's hiring consultants, whether it's on their general manager, whether it's whatever. And I do think that, one, obviously, Johnson's name was floating around before Rivera was even fired because he was, globally speaking, the number one guy. But there was no in the building because none of the people that, I guess Mayhew technically was here, but, like, he doesn't have any decision-making power on a job like that under the current structure. Like, there was no in the building. There were no people outside of Josh Harris and his ownership group, and they're not leaking anything. So I think that Ben Johnson was like number one on their list. Like, we got to talk to this guy, but they had a big list for a reason. And as they went through it, Dan Quinn quickly emerged to the top of their list for all the reasons that we're seeing now. And I think everyone is starting to understand as this has all gone. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Gary in Upper Marlboro. Gary, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
I was always on Dan Quinn, okay? I thought Dan Quinn from the beginning was the best guy because he was a proven guy, all right? All these other hotshot offensive coordinators, I mean, they're a dime a dozen that have never made it, okay? Dan Quinn took a team, and he was within a quarter of winning the Super Bowl, all right? And then he took over a Dallas Cowboys defense and took them up a great notch. Now, he had great players on that side of the ball, but nobody looking at that objectively can say that he didn't have an impact on that defense. So I was always a Dan Quinn guy. I thought he was the best candidate instead of going with someone who has no track record as a head coach. But a couple of things that I want to have a bone of contention with. I mean, the thought for people to say that Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Lynn do not want to be head coaches, that's crazy. Okay, these guys don't want. They can't be a head coach right now, but especially a young guy like Cliff Kingsbury. Okay, if he takes a rookie quarterback and we have a top 5 offense next year, he's going to get head coaching positions or offers.
Of course. Well, especially if he somehow turns one of these quarterbacks into a top 5 offense next year, like Cliff Kingsbury should like go try to walk on water because I don't like that'd be a hell of a job.
Yeah. But I'm saying is for people to say that these guys are totally focused, they don't want to be head coaches. I think they are totally focused on being the best coordinators they have, but it's a path to becoming a head coach again.
Well, I mean that's not really a bone to pick. That's just like stating what I said and twisting it into something I didn't say. The point is that they're focused on this right now. They're not doing a bunch of media stuff. They're actually taking seriously the mantra, the best way to get the job you want is to do the job you have, where we have a long history in the NFL of guys not doing that, where they have their eye on the next job and they wind up losing focus on the current one. So, I mean, I don't really know what bone you're picking there. You're trying to create an argument where there isn't one.
No, I'm not trying to create an argument where there isn't, okay? I mean, how do you see guys? I mean, I don't know that you can turn to a specific example where a guy's been on the job for a couple months and he loses focus on being because he wants to be a head coach. I mean, these guys are hired. They know that if they do the best job they can as an offensive coordinator, that they're going to get head coaching opportunities. And the blanket statement, and this guy just said it, the caller before, hey, they don't want to be head coaches. All these guys want to be head coaches, okay? So,
but, like, the thing is, I actually don't know, like, for a guy like Cliff, Gary, to be honest, like, I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury, like, is super – Cliff's a different dude. He just is. And, like, I think the head coach thing was too much for him, and he knows it. And, like, right now, he just wants to be an OC. It doesn't mean he can't change his mind. I'm not saying he's never going to take a head coaching job, but I think there's a very different approach you take when it's a means to an end versus, like, you want to know what? Like, I'm excited to be in this job right now, and I don't care what happens in the future. And it can be very freeing, and it opens up your creativity, and it affects how you do the job, even if it's subliminal. So, like, I'm not really, like, we're not going to get sidetracked by this semantics argument, but, like, the things you're hearing now about how these coaches are coming to work every day are very different and encouraging, and I don't understand why you need to then try to pick a hole in that as a caller onto a radio show to get us sidetracked from the topic that we're doing. So thanks for the call, and we're going to keep it moving. 301-230-0980. We do this once a week where we open up the phone lines and we have a question, and it would be very cool and good for everyone. I'm not trying to be, like, mean to Gary here, and if we want to talk about that another day, that's fine, but I promise you this is a better show if it stays focused, which is also me reminding myself to stay focused as my ADD runs out of control as more and more people arrive here at Capital One Arena and try to distract me as they walk by. 301-230-0980. Let's real quick get JYD in, and then we'll take more calls after the break. Junkyard Dog, what's up? What's happening? You're here with us on the Hoffman Show. Or not. Ant going once, going twice, and gone. All right, let's see if we can get JYD back on the phone. Tell you what, let's take a quick look at what's trending when we get back. We'll take more of your calls to wrap up the hour here on the Team 980. Some final thoughts on the Sam Howell trade at the top of the hour from one Logan Paulson from Take Command. If you have not heard that yet, I'll give you a little sneak preview as we like to do here on the radio show at the top of the hour. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 301-230-0980 is our phone number, broadcasting live here from Capital One Arena, where you can hear Wizards and Rockets tonight on the Team 980, or you can come out and hang out. Doors will open here in, I think, 45 minutes or so. I think doors open at 5:30. Certainly a lot of activity of people getting set up here around the concourse. And we are on the concourse tonight. We've been here in the past this season. We've been over at District E, but we're on the concourse. Come up, say hi. The rule, as always, is that you say hi in a commercial break, not during the show, because the host is basically a zoo animal that should be behind a cage because he gets very easily distracted. Hey, that's me, the zoo animal. 301-230-0980 is, again, the phone number on this Vibe Check Tuesday. And the question that we are sticking to is, has your opinion of Dan Quinn changed since the hire? And especially as we kind of see the end of free agency here, and we see all the players who have ties to Quinn and or the coaches that he has hired. Let's go to Brian. Brian, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, Craig? Thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
My opinion has changed. It started off, I would describe it as I was intrigued by the hire because of his track record. But through coaching acquisitions, building his staff, and then through free agency, it's gone from intrigue to actually liking it, Craig. I like the move because one thing I think that is always underrated is a new head coach's ability to bring in quality assistant coaches. And from all accounts, it seems that Dan did that, and he did it quickly. And then with free agency, I think Peters has been getting a lot of credit for the free agents we've signed, but to me, it has Quinn's thumbprints all over it. So what I think is that we could be, and this could be me looking at the glass half full, but we could be looking at a head coach GM duo that is on their way to hopefully, a successful run here. So that's why I like the hire, Craig. Thanks for taking my call. I'll listen to your thoughts.
Yeah, no, thanks for the call. I think it's a really well put and concisely put point that, I think the model for DQ is his mentor and the guy that he started under in the NFL, in Pete Carroll. Like, if Adam Peters is Washington's John Schneider, and Dan Quinn, super highly energetic defensive coach who just is a different level of environment setter, who, by the way, failed in his first run as an NFL head coach, learned a lot, did some other stuff, and then came back around in his second turn. If DQ is Pete Carroll, we're going to be real happy. But, of course, that still relies on getting quarterback right eventually. And I think Seattle, even in their down years with Russ, and now, if you want to count these years as down with Geno, where they're not as good as they used to be, obviously, when they had DQ as the DC and were going to Super Bowls early in those days when those defenses were loaded. But they've been competitive year in and year out. And when they had Russ playing at an MVP level, like, they were one of the best teams in the NFC, and they'd win playoff games, and they were in it every single year. But you got to get quarterback right. That's ultimately, like, none of this matters if you don't get that right. But that's built in. That's true for anyone. And I think that's what's really exciting is I think the stuff that you can control right now, they've done a really good job of, and I think Peters and Quinn absolutely could be that duo for Washington for a long time, and we'll see if they can get the biggest piece right in terms of player personnel. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Rick. Rick, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, so for me, it was definitely a 180, if not a 360. If you think about it, everything about this guy really made sense. Well, first of all, to be honest with you, I didn't want anything from Dallas. But when you think about it, he was the head coach of that team that kept Tom Brady's offense at bay, and I'm quite sure his defensive input had something to do with it for almost 3 quarters.
For sure.
Until Shanahan blew it. And then what the other caller says is absolutely true. But they're missing one thing, that he wanted to be here.
Yes.
He was very interested in this job, and I would rather have somebody that wants to be here other than somebody that's reluctantly taking the job. And for me, that was huge. So yeah, it's definitely changed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that call a lot. I think that's such a great point at the end too. Like, I think one, Dan realizes that the right guy to run a team is obviously Adam Peters. Like, he's like, yeah, that's my guy. I would very much like to work with that man. And not that there weren't great options. I mean, Mike McDonald goes to Seattle and gets to work with John Schneider. That's a great pairing. Like, this isn't a zero-sum game. This isn't something where our guy's awesome, your guy sucks. But it's like, our guy's got different strengths than your guy. How are you going to apply them? You know, Mike McDonald is probably going to he should call the plays in Baltimore. Like, he's been in Seattle. He was incredible in Baltimore. He should use that strength. I actually thought that, Dan Quinn should have also kept being a play caller here, but he's got faith in Joe Witt. And if Joe Witt's as good as Dan Quinn at it, then amazing. Zero problem. If Joe Witt's not, then Dan Quinn better take those play calling duties back. And it's something that he probably learned in Atlanta and wishes he would have done sooner. But you got to get the OC hire right, and that's easier when you're Dan Quinn than you are Mike McDonald. So there's a lot of positives, negatives, whatever. But I think ultimately, like we talked earlier in the hour about everyone being on the same page. You can't be on the same page unless you want to be on the same page. And Dan Quinn wanted to be here. He vibed with Josh Harris. He vibed with Adam Peters. And then obviously he's going to vibe with his coaches because he's the one that hired them in the first place. 301-230-0980 here on the Hoffman Show. Taking your calls, wrapping up the hour on a Vibe Check Tuesday. Let's go to Scott. Scott, thanks for calling. You are on the Team 980.
Hey, what's up, Craig?
What's up, Scott?
I bought into the whole narrative at first that we settled for Dan Quinn, and then after reading and hearing how respected and liked he was by his peers and players and everybody, I didn't hear one person say anything bad about him except some of the talking heads on ESPN about the hire itself, but. I'm excited because of the coaches he brought in. I'm excited because a lot of the free agents we signed are guys that could have went somewhere else. So we're no longer having to settle for players. Well, I can't get anywhere else. I'll go to Washington. I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. But like you say, it all depends what we end up doing with that number 2 pick or a quarterback move otherwise. So I'm looking forward to the season.
Yeah, same. And Scott, thanks for the call. I think that a lot of people are actually looking forward to the season, which, is something that I don't think was the case last year. Like, I think a lot of us were just like, let's get it over with. Like, in that way, we were looking forward to the season. I mean, I guess if I rewind 12 months ago, I was super intrigued by Howell. Obviously. Super tantalizing talent. Is it going to work out? Also, we didn't realize just how many warts EB had at that point, so I think there was a lot of optimism around Bieniemy. But in some ways, I think, and maybe it's just the contrast, and maybe we'll be disappointed. It's possible. I'm trying not to do blind optimism. But in a lot of ways, like the lack of pizzazz and the lack of boom or bustness, because like this doesn't feel like it's going to bust. Is it going to boom? I don't know. We'll find out. It's going to depend on that number 2 pick in large part, because we presume that's going to be quarterback, and that's the biggest driver of success in the NFL. But I think the lack of boomer bustness to the season and the general steadiness and the contrast of that just feels so good. It feels comforting. If you've been in, and I'm not even talking about like romantic relationships, but certainly that's an example. But if you've been in a tumultuous relationship, professionally, personally, romantically, whatever, and then you find someone who's just like, chill. Like, and I actually think, like, in a lot of ways, professional relationships can be the best example of this, where it's like you have a boss who's all over the place and, like, there's drama and people are whatever at work and, like, it's nasty, and you quit or you get fired and you find another job and it's just like people show up, they do their jobs, and they go home. You're like, this is the greatest thing ever. Security, stability. And that's what I think this feels like. And after 25 years of what was, having something that feels less chaotic, having something that feels substantive instead of, splashy, I think is a massive change that Commanders fans are more than ready to welcome. And thus, I think the changing tide of opinion overall when it comes to Dan Quinn. Great calls this hour here on Vibe Check Tuesday. This is why we do this. You guys always come through on Tuesdays with the goods. So appreciate everybody who called. Dan, if we didn't get to you today, we will perhaps take some calls later in the 5 o'clock hour, and certainly be taking calls tomorrow here in the 4 o'clock hour. So we'll try to get to you tomorrow. 301-230-0980. Save that number in your phone. Get those quick dial fingers ready. Speed dial. Does anyone use speed dial anymore? Whatever. Point is, you know how to get in touch with us, and we certainly appreciate everyone who did here for Vibe Check Tuesday. Coming up next, Logan Paulson's thoughts on the Sam Howell trade is today's edition of Not My Beat, as we will play for you a snippet of Take Command. That is next. Ava Wallace on set live here at Capital One Arena, talking Wizards at 5:30. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We're live at Capital One Arena on the Hoffman Show. Team 980 always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Coming up in about half an hour, we'll actually talk Wizards here at Cap One as we're here ahead of Wizards and Rockets tonight. But Ava Wallace is going to join us. We got some news last night that Bilal Coulibaly's season is over. So what do we make of his first year as a Wizard? What kind of success do we see it as, and what do the Wizards have to build on with Coulibaly moving forward? Plus, kind of how's the Brian Keefe experiment gone? We'll get into some Wizards hot topics with Ava on set here at Capital One Arena. Right now, though, it is time for Not My Beat. Anthony, we can skip the Not My Beat intro because today's Not My Beat is a clip from Take Command, an extended discussion from Take Command. Logan Paulson and I discussing the Sam Howell trade, why we think it was the right move, and the justification for it. Definitely, you've heard some of my thoughts on the show, but let's get Logan involved as well here on a Not My Beat Tuesday.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Welcome in to Take Command. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson on free agency Monday, week 2. Logan, what a week 1 it was. So much movement, trades, everything all around the league. We'll talk about kind of the around the league portion in a little bit. We'll also talk about where we are now looking ahead to the NFL draft after 1 week and obviously still plenty to go. But we start with the biggest move at the end of last week, the one that it's funny, man. We hypothesized like what's going to happen with Sam Howell at the end of the pod last time we recorded, and then hours later, barely had we gotten the thing out when at least they waited for a little bit to get it out. But we see him shipped off to Seattle. The return is somewhere the equivalence of a third rounder, according to the Jimmy Johnson draft chart. Other draft charts have it as kind of a seventh rounder. I think the widest consensus charts are somewhere early to mid fourth rounder in return. But the hard facts are they upgrade a sixth to a fifth and a fourth to a third, and include the highest one being that 78th pick that they received from Seattle in return for their starting quarterback last year. Logan, and with that gigantic setup, what do you make of the deal for Washington?
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be a little bit. Mark alluded to some of that kind of like uncertainty, I think, in our last podcast, because he's a good player. He's got some ability, but, how do you handle that with Marcus on the roster? And you're probably going to draft a guy, maybe not at 2, but at somewhere in the draft that's going to be kind of the face of the franchise moving forward. And it just became a little weird. And I think they determined that he did have value still, and that the teams are going to be willing to give stuff for that. And I think in this retooling, rebuilding type of an environment, like draft picks are worth a lot of money, and especially if you have a guy here that, is a former 5th round pick, you're not invested in, and there is value for him around the league, you might as well get it, and I think a lot of fans are probably disappointed, and I understand why, because they think you did see flashes and you did see some of his ability, but I think it's important to understand that this staff is not connected to him. So I think moving on, getting something in return makes a lot of sense to me. And again, like I'm not moving players or people that show they have ability at the quarterback position, because you can develop those guys and potentially trade them later. They just chose to do it now. And I think the other point to consider there with that perspective is that even though people can develop young talent, like how are they going to develop him here in this? If he's the third guy, he's going to be potential practice squad guy. You're going to lose him potentially. It just becomes way more complicated. So get the value while you got him. And, unfortunately, like he leaves, and I think he's a good football player, but, I think it's probably a better opportunity for Sam. So.
Yeah, there's no way he's getting to practice squad. You're not cutting him and then having him not claim. So that's not possible. If you're going to keep him, he's going to have to be the third guy on the roster, presumably behind the number 2 pick and then Marcus Mariota. Or as we talked about last week, like maybe he does beat Mariota fairly and squarely, and he's QB2 / the starter if the number 2 pick isn't ready. And we went through all that, which we don't need to go through again because now it's irrelevant. But I do think that what we definitely see, or the last thing I'll say on the development point is, let's say he does develop, they find a way, and like in practice, he's showing himself really, really well. No other team's going to know. What are they going to do? Take your word for it? Like, hey, do you guys want to give us a 3rd rounder for Howell? He's killing it in practice. Right. Like, that's not how this works. So there's no place to showcase that, unlike a defensive lineman getting rotational snaps. You're not putting Sam Howell out there for a half to be like, hey, everybody come trade for Sam. So there's no real way to display that. And thus his value probably is going to decrease from this point, sitting on the bench as the contract continues to toll. And you now get him 2 years left on his rookie deal if you're Seattle, which is why other teams, Denver and others reportedly, were in on him. I think the other thing that fans have to kind of, and to a sense, like I think us as analysts have to try to parse out is, Sam did not get a fair shake in DC, without question. I think the play calling last year, we've talked about it, wasn't very good, did not set him up to succeed. There was no incubation of him as a young player. They put way too much on his plate, and it just felt unfair, especially be a good player. But it's not Adam Peters' responsibility to find out how good Sam Howell is. It's his responsibility to do what's best for the Washington Commanders. And I think getting pick number 78 in this draft is without a doubt the best thing to do for the Washington Commanders compared to keeping a talented guy on your roster that has more value as a trade chip than he will to you in 2024.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Like, I think people want to, they want what's best for the individual. And I think like that is a little bit of a misnomer. And I think people don't understand how cutthroat this is. The NFL, like, it's not about how the staff develops you, it's how you develop yourself. And I think, like to your point, like it's not Adam Peters' responsibility to see how good Sam can be, And like,
it's how good can the Commanders be, and Sam can figure out how good he is somewhere else.
Yeah, 100%. And I've told this story before. You play with a lot of guys who are really talented, guys that could potentially start given the right opportunity, but just don't come out, get traded, and no one knows about them. And I think, like, I look back on my own experience making the Commanders, the Redskins at the time, making that team in 2010. Like, it kind of had to fall the right way for me to even get an opportunity. And I think people don't understand that. And so for him to get that sustained success, like the chips didn't fall. And I think he's a big name, he's a notable name. But I think when you kind of take a step back and look at what the team has invested in him, look at what he did last year, like, it makes sense to me that they would move on. And especially like in this draft where, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, where there's an opportunity for some trading of picks, getting another 3rd round pick, having that opportunity to kind of package that or move that or use it to offset some cost. And it's a bonus pick. So it makes a lot of sense to me. And again, like, even if you don't move it, there's going to be a good player there that's going to help your roster with that pick. So, good luck to Sam, and hopefully fans understand that it is a business. It is a business decision, and it's not what can you be, it's what have you done for me lately. And if you haven't shown me what I need to see, then I'm going to move on. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the deal at the NFL. So.
The other thing I wonder about this too is it does feel like this group has done a good job of removing resistance and drama potentially. And this is not the fault of Sam remotely, but he does have a large following in the fan base. And there is an element of, and I don't know, like, this is kind of more of, I'm setting up a premise here, and I'm curious if you who's been around the league, you were also someone who was a player. Don't care. Even within different front offices, people care or not about narratives more or less, coaching staffs, ownership groups, etc. But clearly, if either the number 2 pick struggled or Marcus struggled, there were going to be calls for Sam if he wasn't playing. He was going to be, to use the vaunted word, a distraction. And it's just, whether it's like there really is impact on or not, now you don't have to deal with it. And to me, that seems smart. Like the what kind of juice is worth the squeeze there of like, oh, well, if everything goes haywire, we need to play him. He could maybe be good. Like, that's the potential payoff versus this dude is kind of lingering over. And in the same way that they moved on from some other guys, where it just like wasn't a fit and the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I kind of feel like getting this storyline out of town now is the right move for the organization to create a smoother path moving forward. That's me sitting in a talk radio chair. How do you see it from your chair?
No, I agree. I think that's entirely valid, and I think that's something that I don't care a lot about. Like you said, it does become a distraction. Like, here's your potentially third string quarterback, and people are like, why isn't he active? What's going on with Sam? It's like the coach does not have the bandwidth to be talking about that, especially when you have a guy at number 2. And like you said, let's say he struggles a little bit. And it's like, well, Sam, he's on the roster. Let's get him in there. And then every day they're asking, like in the locker room, they're talking to players. Do you think Sam should start? Who do you think should start? Like, is Sam look good? You don't need it. And again,
Right.
when you're turning a new page, when there's an opportunity to do this, when there's an opportunity to get value in return, it's like, might as well move on. And I think a little bit of it, it's like, you look at these teams moving quarterbacks, like there's a reason they're doing that. Like, Justin Fields has a huge fan following in Chicago. Kenny Pickett has a big fan following in Pittsburgh. It's like, just remove that distraction, let them have an opportunity to succeed and blossom somewhere else. Because like we said, it's not our job. It's not my job as Adam Peters or Dan Quinn to maximize the Commanders. And if that is going to be an issue and fans are going to be talking about it, and even if players in the locker room are going to be talking about, hey, do you remember how good Sam was last year? That's not putting that number 2 overall pick or wherever they are picking in the best position to be successful. So that's something I keep coming back to. And it's not fair. It's not fair to Sam. It's not his fault. But I do think if you're trying to build a team and there is that kind of dissension in the locker room and in the media and in the fan base, now just remove it. We don't even have to talk about it. It's number 2, and no one is calling or hearkening for Marcus Mariota to be the starter when you got Drake May, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, name your guy, Bo Nix, whoever it is. Like, everything's going to be kind of squared up. So,
Yeah. All right. Let's give those Howlers one last bite at the apple here, though. Sam goes to Seattle. Obviously, he showed so much. I think the way he carried himself was fantastic this past year. I thought at many times he was the best voice in the locker room / on the team at the podium. Like, I liked what he had to say, better than the head coach, better than the offensive coordinator, better than a lot of people in that locker room. I think he showed a leadership capability. I'll always go back to that video that we've definitely shared on the pod before, that the Commanders captured post game Dallas after that infamous year 1 start, where Rivera has this look after Sam gives the speech in the locker room, being like, wait, that's who that kid is? That's what I've had in this locker room the whole time. And like, the leadership is just oozing out of him. And I think that he can do well in this league. Like, somewhere in that 15 to 20 range, which is like a legitimate starter in the NFL. Obviously, your hope with the number 2 pick is that you get something much better than that. Hence, Adam Peters is making the right call here. But if you look at Sam Howell, having watched every snap of his on tape, year we're studying him to go over everything for the pod, as he was the starter. Like, where do you see Sam and his career going from here, starting this year, presumably as the number 2 to Geno Smith in Seattle?
yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact weeks, but it was like through probably 2 or 3 games, and he just looked like the dude, like all the things you're talking about from a quarterback, the big time throws, the like just the composure, the leadership, like the moment never felt too big. And that's exciting, but I do think that it's important to know that, like, Aiden O'Connell showed something similar in Vegas this year. There were moments where he looked really good. And I think it's just about, I heard this thing on Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Books. I think I sent it to you, Craig, where they were talking about being patient with young athletes and letting them develop. And unfortunately, Sam was not afforded that opportunity. So now I'm kind of hoping that he is given an environment where they can be patient with him. He's the number 2. We'll have a lot of time to kind of sit, work, and develop. And then, like, I honestly could see him making a kind of like a reappearance at some point after an injury to kind of like be the next Geno Smith, like, 3-4 years down the road. Because I think, like you said, the leadership, the charisma, all that stuff is, we got to see that. And then obviously the physical arm talent is also valuable. Spot, like, lightning's kind of got to strike for that to happen. But I do think that's a possibility for him, because I do think the physical skill set is there. So, good luck to him. Hopefully that happens, because again, like, you want success for these guys. You want them to make a lot of money, but it's there is a roadmap. If you squint and kind of look at the map in the right way, there is an opportunity for him to get there.
Years. Obviously, there's a new staff up in Seattle with McDonald and Ryan Grubb coming up from Alabama. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't think they fully committed to Geno as their starter, and certainly as a guy in his 30s, on a deal they can move on from. If Sam comes out and has a terrific camp, terrific offseason, who knows what happens there for him. So he's certainly in a great spot, I think, too, with the receivers that he's got, the type of receivers that he likes to throw to. Jackson Smith and Jigba's a guy who can create separation and be college open, even in the NFL. DK is enormous and thus always open to an extent. Tyler Lockett, great deep threat. So there's a lot for him to play with up there in Seattle if he does get the opportunity. And I think, to your point, is he ever going to be a franchise guy who gets the franchise deal? Is he ever going to get even what Kirk just signed for? Probably not. But could he do kind of what Geno's done, where he makes really good money by any other standard, other standard other than NFL QB money or NBA player money, and is there, and thus that contract affords him to be the quarterback of a winning team? Yeah, absolutely, because you're saving $20 million on your quarterback. It's a little more invested in other places, and as long as he's happy to sit at that level, Sam Howell, I think can in the future win you football games. But when you have the number 2 pick, you are looking for that franchise guy. You are looking for someone who you think has Hall of Fame level of potential. And that is ultimately why they make this decision. But that doesn't mean Sam Howell's a bad football player. I think they made a good deal here. And thus onward we go into the rest of free agency, the rest of the Commanders' future without Sam Howell. Best of luck to Sam. And that's this, at least for now, Logan. Finally, once and for all, concludes our Sam Howell talk. All right, for more from Logan and I, you can definitely check out the full edition of Take Command, where we talk about more of the free agent class. We talk about kind of the free agent class around the NFL. And then, Anthony, we did something that might upset some people. And I mean, I don't know what to say other than we did something that might upset some people. And that is, we talked about the idea of trading the number 2 overall pick. And for some reason, that gets a very violent response on the internet. I don't feel like we've had that with calls as much, but certainly in the YouTube comments and stuff. And we'll talk about some of this tomorrow when we do Never Read the Comments. But we have gotten a lot of angry people. And it was actually, in that way, a really nice conversation for me, because Logan agrees with me that it is not a slam dunk home run quarterback class, as touted as it has been for a long time, and as much as we've known that Drake and Caleb were, in the eyes of some elite prospects, and still, I think, in the eyes of many, but it was nice to be able to say out loud, I don't know about these quarterbacks, and not be greeted with, you're an idiot, which, the internet's always the place you go for positive self-reinforcement. But it was just nice to know that as Logan has watched more of these quarterbacks and has continued to watch and study and gather information, that outside of Caleb, who's not even home run guaranteed, because no such thing really exists, but is a different level of prospect, that even with the Drake May, who a lot of people think is pretty close to that, and certainly with Jaden Daniels and J.J. McCarthy, they all have their warts. And if Minnesota wants to offer a war chest, then all right, let's see what's in that war chest,
Yeah, but Craig, for a fan base that hasn't had a franchise quarterback in Lord knows how many years, we're yearning for one. And this is our opportunity to finally go out and get there. So the fact that we could actually trade away this opportunity, I think, is why so many fans are so upset. I understand. Yes, you can get a haul of picks. You can definitely bolster the roster, and hopefully find a diamond in the rough like a Brock Purdy. But you know how lucky and fortunate you have to be to bet on something like that. It's too big of a risk. It's too big of a risk.
It's a huge. It is a risk, unless, and this is kind of the thing. This is what I've said and we can pull the tape. Like, we got it. I wish I'd had you cut this in January, Mr. King of the Clip. Like, if you love one of these guys, take them. Like, I got no issue with that whatsoever. If you don't love one of these guys and someone else does, how much can you squeeze them for? And that's the thing, is like, we operate, like, I think a lot of people operate on the trade discussion based off their own opinions, right? So I have, like, this one commenter who thinks he's the smartest evaluator that's ever walked the planet. And on every video that we post of the show on YouTube, he's like, Jaden's the pick. I don't get the Drake May thing. Craig's such a Drake May lover, which, like, I'm not. I've kind of said, like, Drake is the consensus or the majority pick at 2, like, and that's probably the direction I would go. But I'm not sitting here being like, Drake May is amazing. He's got no flaws. As I said yesterday, Drake May scares the bejesus out of me with the footwork stuff. But, like, every single thing that we post about quarterback, he's just, like, gung-ho on, and there's a lot of people like this, on Jaden Daniels especially. And then, like, the next 5 comments are people who feel the same way about Drake May. And it's like, can you hold the thoughts in your head that we don't know? Like, can we just admit that evaluating quarterback in the NFL is really hard, and that if you are doing this, now you better be right, because if you pass up on someone who turns out to be awesome, like, you know, people are going to obviously remember that. But if you really don't feel that good about any of these guys, I would kick the can down the road and try to build out the rest of the roster. Like, that's just how I feel. But that sentence starts with, if you don't love any of these guys. And I think that's where people just like to ignore that part and get really angry at the idea that you could do something really smart and prudent because they think it's dumb based off their own evaluation because they watched a 7-minute highlight film on YouTube.
Yeah, I think the possibility is definitely on the table. It might not be a strong possibility, and that's probably what fans need to realize.
100%.
Like, it could be a 2% possibility, but it's still a possibility. And, yeah, we just got to wrap our heads around it. But I'm all for, right now anyway, getting our guy at number 2.
Yeah, it's just I don't know who that guy is. I personally don't have an our guy.
Nope.
So that's part of the issue as well. Maybe that's why I'm more open to it, is because I'm not some Drake May lover in the way that a lot of my very smart friends who do this for a living are. But, like, even, like, there's, you know, Matt Miller was like, I had Drake as number 2, and then they hired Cliff, and now I've got Jaden there because I think he's a better fit with Cliff. Like, it's just, there's no consensus. So, is what it is. The Hoffman Show, we're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And coming up next, Ava Wallace will join us here on set, Washington Post reporter covering the Wizards. Bilal Coulibaly's season is over. What do we make of his rookie campaign, and where do the Wizards go from here? Ava with us next.
Kevin.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see Ava Wallace, Washington Post, with us here at Capital One Arena. Because, yes, we're broadcasting live from Capital One Arena, and just because we are anticipating the game tonight. So much between the Rockets and the Wizards. Ava, who's playing tonight?
Justin Champagnie. He's
Yeah.
doing really well. A little Patrick Baldwin Jr., definitely some Jordan Poole, and nobody else.
I'm going to slide this microphone up so we can hear you a little bit better.
Oh,
there we go.
Thank you. See, I'm a writer, not a radio.
Yeah,
person.
it's okay.
That's
I'm my own tech today, which is always really fun. But yeah, so we got some Wizards guys some Wizards who will be wearing Washington Wizards uniforms who will play against the Rockets tonight in the most anticipated matchup on 6th Street in the NBA tonight. We wanted to have you here because obviously the big news in reality in Wizards land came out last night. Bilal Coulibaly, his season is over. Yeah. Wrist injury, they thought it was a contusion, took to imaging. Turns out it's broken. That's not great. But what do you make of his rookie season?
I thought he had a great rookie season. I thought he definitely exceeded expectations, mostly because I don't think a lot of people knew that much about him. He was coming over from France. He was kind of touted as Victor Wembanyama's teammate. So the guy next to him, who GM Will Dawkins was going over to France to watch. But he turned out to be really good, and I think because he's so young and because he kind of approached his task with so much enthusiasm, I thought he became really beloved. Like, the response to my story was insane. People really, really loved him, so it was kind of fun to see that and have that like beacon of hope in this otherwise pretty terrible season.
Yeah, because I feel like the word on him coming into the season was very much like could bounce back and forth to the go-go in the G League. Very, very developmental project. And then very, very quickly, even before Brian Keefe took over and he got in the starting lineup and all that, but it's like, no, that dude's our best perimeter defender. He's going to guard the best guy. Like, we're going to put that on him and see how he handled it. How quickly do you think that they realized that? And, like, what do you think that was the proper approach to give him that much responsibility and kind of approach the season that way for him?
Definitely. And Wes Unseld Jr. at the start of the year was kind of being coy with it. And they were very much like, listen, the expectations are low. We are going to take things slowly, which is totally fine with a rookie when you're rebuilding. But I remember him saying, yeah, he might see some time with the go-go. And I kind of remember thinking, what's the point of putting him down with the go-go when you're in a rebuilding year? So wins aren't necessarily, you're not trying to beat everybody. So it's good that he got that experience, especially on defense, and he kind of got a really good kind of crash course in how fast and how physical the NBA is. And he loved it. Like, he never dipped. He never, he took lumps every single night.
Yeah.
Like, he got,
This league is
he
hard
got
as hell.
absolutely blown by sometimes. And he was just like, yeah, working on being better. And he was a really fast learner. So I think that's invaluable experience.
Ava Wallace on set with us here at Capital One Arena, of course, Washington Post, Wizards beat reporter. So I think that one thing that was interesting to watch over the course of the season is kind of that development plan that seemed very prescriptive for certain guys of like, we want you to focus on this. And you'd see fans being like, well, I want to see Bilal take more shots, or I want to see the ball in Denny's hands more, for instance, two of the big examples. For Bilal, like, how did you see the other parts of his game come along, and how did the handling of his responsibilities change with the coaching change mid-season?
Yeah, I think with the coaching change, to address that first, what they mostly just wanted, especially since it happened later in the year, and that was kind of the plan all along, but they mostly wanted to just get him more experience. After All-Star, he was always going to be in the starting lineup. Why not stick him out there and get him good minutes against kind of other starters in the league? So that was the plan, I think, even before the Jordan Poole benching came about. But early in the year, it was about using his defense and learning how to kind of move his body. He had really good court awareness for a teenager. They drafted him when he was 18. He started in the league when he was 19. He had really good court awareness, knew how to use his length, but it's a different thing coming in and learning to read defenses and learning to anticipate offenses. Of course, he had to learn all the guys he was going to be guarding. It's different than watching Jason Tatum on TV and trying to keep up with him in an NBA game, so they wanted that. And then shot confidence was huge. Brian Keefe was actually the guy he was working with all year. Like, that was his development coach who was with him every day at practice, who kind of fine-tuned and retooled his shot a little bit and made him way, way, way more confident in that you saw him taking a lot of, they were corner threes. They're not the hardest threes in the league, but he was making them. He was on a little hot streak there in December before cooling off a little bit mid-January, but confidence was huge for him on the offensive end.
So to give folks an idea, like we can watch him on TV. You are in the locker room pre-post game. Like you actually get to talk to him. And again, we're talking about this in case you guys missed it last night. Bilal Coulibaly's season comes to an end. His rookie year, very successful campaign, I think, in a lot of accounts, certainly Ava's, and in my opinion here. But, like, what's he like to talk to? Like, what kind of head is on that young kid's shoulders?
Oh, my gosh. He's awesome. He's so chill. Like, he's always happy. I remember talking to him. I did a feature on him before All-Star, and I was kind of asking him about going up against guys who were just absolutely running him over every night. And he was like, I'm having so much fun. Like, he was just like, I was watching these guys on TV last year. You remember, like, it was February 2023 that he got called up on the his French club team, that he got called up to the senior team. So it's only a year that, the NBA wasn't, it's something he wanted since he was a kid, but it wasn't actually within his grasp until like a couple months before the draft. So this is very much a whirlwind for him. He's got a great head on his shoulders. Mom and dad have kind of been coming over from France and alternating spending time with him. So he's got a grounded family presence. He's got sisters he's super close to, but very low key, didn't seem fazed by much, just a super happy guy who was just like, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Having a great time. Pretty quiet, so it'll be interesting to see how he kind of evolves as a voice in the locker room.
Yeah, how has the locker... I mean, I think this locker room is much more similar than we thought it was going to be because we thought there would be a lot more trades at the deadline. Yeah. They hold on to Tyus, for instance. Mm-hmm. But, one thing you do kind of keep hearing is that this is still like a pretty tight locker room, and some of the nonsense that has happened in years past, and frankly happens on most losing teams in all sports, hasn't really infiltrated this room. Is that a lot of really good positive spin coming out, or like do you think that is genuine that this group has kept a pretty healthy environment despite the lack of winning?
No, it's definitely been a healthy environment. I will say that's something I've experienced all year, that it's a really good group that really understood what was going to happen this year. I mean, nobody expected them to be this bad, players included, and that's not to say that they're not absolutely bummed out after a terrible loss or when they were on that, 16-game winning streak, or
16,
losing streak.
17, whatever it got to.
Yeah, guys were definitely feeling that, and you could tell, but nobody was snapping at each other. Nobody was doing anything that was like unproductive criticism. You see they kind of get after each other on court sometimes, which I think is healthy and normal and good. No, but from everything I've seen and everything I've heard, it's a very the vibes are more lighthearted than you'd expect, I think, because everybody understands what's going on.
Yeah, they're in on the joke, if you will. Not that it's a joke, but they're in on it.
It feels like a joke sometimes.
It does certainly feel like a joke. Well, so that kind of unfortunately spins us to where I want to go next, which is they move on from West Unseld because they are not competitive. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, very clearly the necessary move at the time. I think everyone was on the same page. Everyone was on the same page with that. And they have been, I think, on the whole, more competitive since Brian Keefe took over. But the last couple of weeks, they have seemingly regressed into some really, really bad losses. Is that just because they've had so many injury issues and they literally at this point don't have the personnel? Or has some of the new coach shine, if you will, worn off and some bad habits started to redevelop?
I think both of those things. Something to remember about a rebuilding team, especially one with there's a large talent gap between the Wizards and their opponent almost every single night. It's not going to be linear progress. So that progress when Keefe took over, like you said, it was kind of like a new voice in the room, a little kick in the gut for them. You definitely saw them competing. I think you still do see them competing a little bit harder, especially in the second half. But it's not going to be linear progress. It's going to be a lot of ups and downs, especially on a team so young, especially on a team where, the leadership qualities are kind of dispersed between a couple of guys. It's not like there's one person everybody's following. So that made sense to me. It just does kind of, I think the only thing you reflect on is okay, that coaching change clearly needed. I think the locker room was wanting it. So that's one thing it achieved. But what else did the coaching, how effective was that coaching change, I guess? I think there are a couple of different ways to measure it, and that's something that I would be interested to look into.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's something where, for Brian Keefe, it was a bit of an audition. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know how that's gone at this point. I don't know if he's going to get
Tough
a serious –
job.
It is,
Tough
right?
Job coming in.
And that would kind of be my question, right, is if I'm Dawkins and Winger, I'm obviously going to cast a wide net. Mm-hmm. But, is he in the net?
I think he'd have to be, just because by default, if you want to give your guy who came up a fair shake, and certainly Brian Keefe is I think, done pretty well with a nearly impossible task of, coming in. Just something I think of every night when we talk to him, and he's relentlessly positive, and he's, sharing with us what he can, but it's not like you can come in as an interim coach and be super critical of your guys, or you have to kind of keep people together and keep people trending in the right direction, and that's the main task. So it's an interesting kind of grade sheet that you're measuring him on. But yeah, I think he would definitely be in the conversation.
So this is rebuild year one, and obviously they weren't very good most of the previous years, but like this year they were trying. So
I know it's funny that they're actually not tanking this year, and everyone actually is legitimately injured. It's not that they're holding guys out; like everyone's just injured.
No, it's like they would like Bilal to get an extra 10 games at the end of the season.
Landry
here.
Shamet doesn't need to be resting; like he's injured.
They don't have dudes.
Yeah.
So I think people now understand better, if you're Wizards fans, the speed that this is going to happen, which is to say extremely slowly.
Yeah.
That said, what kind of accelerator gets hit this summer I don't know how much you know at this point, how much you're guessing, how much they even know at this point, but your best guess is as good as anybody's best guess because you cover this and do a great job with it. So what kind of accelerator gets hit this summer with potential trades, signings, a new coach, etc.?
I don't think this is a team that's going to be super active in free agency, because why would they spend a ton of money to get a big guy coming here? So it's going to be a lot of littler trades, a lot of kind of working contracts out, and they're going to bring a lot of people through these doors. They just had a player come over, Tristan Vucevic. I think I said that right. Coming over from Europe, that's somebody that you just want to get him in the door and see what he can do. I think the biggest thing that would be solved this year that they were, maybe Winger and Dawkins weren't necessarily so set on last season when they didn't know the room as much, is, okay, who are going to be our young guys who we're really taking forward, and we're really going to kind of build around this thing. And you've seen the emergence of Denny Avdia. You've seen Corey Kispert. We kind of are figuring some things out with Jordan Poole. So I think that young core is going to firm up, certainly. And that doesn't mean I honestly don't think anybody, maybe but Jordan Poole, you can guarantee, even though they gave Denny a contract, just because of where they are in the rebuilding process, I still think the roster could change, and I'm not saying those guys are definitely going to be here, but I think that's what's going to firm up this summer, is who are our guys going forward? Who are we building around? Who are we saying is the face of the franchise for the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think that's so hard, too, because obviously it'll depend on who they draft, and this isn't seen as a particularly great draft, but hey, if there's been... out of the Anthony Bennett draft came Giannis Antetokounmpo, so it was a great draft for the Bucks. So there's that. I think I have those years right. They all start to run together. Anyway, the point is, it could be a good draft for them, even if it's a bad draft for other teams. But we'll see. And then the other thing that I just wonder is Kuzma, especially, he's the big one. But Tyus, can they pull off with Tyus? It would be a sign and trade. Can they? Do they say hey Kyle, I know you didn't trade at the deadline. We know you want to be here, but at this point, the best thing you can do for the Wizards is go somewhere else that's a competitor that's going to give us stuff. And is that kind of stuff this offseason that they hit that button? Do they wait till the trade deadline next year? I just kind of wonder when the next big thing happens, because it feels like in a rebuild, you need that. And obviously, Beal was a very significant part of that. Porzingis, I think people forget, was a pending free agent that had a say in where he could go. But, it still feels like a lot of the same and repercussions from the last regime versus, the full reset refresh.
Yeah, Kuz I don't know with, because they have him. They have him under a pretty good contract, especially. They're not really paying anyone else that much. They've got Jordan's contract. They've got Kuz's contract. It's not like they're bleeding money or anything. They've been pretty smart about that. But something that you've got to watch is what's going on with the Tyus Jones-Jordan Poole situation. Who is the point guard here? Tyus Jones doesn't want to go back to the bench after this season. He's proven himself as a pretty competent starting point guard. That's the advantage the Wizards have in saying, hey, we can offer you this. But since they do own his bird rights, they have a little bit more flexibility. They can get him somewhere he wants to go. They can talk about staying here. But that's the thing I'm watching this offseason is what are we going to do at point guard? Because I don't think Jordan Poole likes being on the bench.
No, and nor does he like playing shooting guard. And considering what the results are, if I was Jordan Poole, I wouldn't like playing shooting guard either.
Yeah.
That's Ava Wallace, Washington Post. You can read her work at WashingtonPost.com/sports. I know you're working on a feature. Can you tell people what that's going to be or not
Oh, yeah.
Not yet?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, you can figure it out. There are 2 guys right now who really matter, so I'm writing about one of them.
There you go.
Going forward into
We'll leave
summer.
a little piece of mystery for you. WashingtonPost.com/sports. That'll be up here in the next couple of days. Ava, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks, buddy.
Dave Johnson with us at 6:15, as he always is, on a Wizards game. I think he's even going to come down and sit with us here as opposed to the broadcast booth upstairs. So that'll be exciting. And we'll talk a little bit more Wizards before we get back to the Commanders at 6 o'clock next.
Woo-hoo.
The Hoffman Show, we're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We are live at Capital One Arena, and actually we got a switcheroo coming up at 6:15. I was just texting with Dave, and Chris Wright is in the building tonight, who often does the post-game show with them. And he is actually the only former NBA player who has MS, which obviously Dave has been battling MS, and they've done so much great work over the years. And Dave was like, how about you have Chris on instead? So we're going to have Chris coming up at 6:15 talking Wizards instead of Dave. He's, of course, part of the Wizards broadcast team. So that'll be a fun little switch up. You know, we love having Dave on. Obviously, Dave Johnson, the legend. That voice, the charisma, the jokes, all the great stuff that we get to do with Dave. But we're going to have Chris Wright coming up here on studio or on set, I should say, at 6:15.
Chris Wright. Georgetown's Chris Wright?
Georgetown's Chris Wright.
We're talking about St. John's Cadet Chris Wright. Okay, that's tough.
Yeah, so that's I mean, we still got him outnumbered though, Ant.
We do.
We do.
We do
The orange still can reign supreme here in Capital One Arena, even though we will allow a former Georgetown player on set. I think Ava. I mean, obviously Ava does such a good job covering the Wizards, but I think Ant, she really nailed it when it came to Bilal. I think they did a really good job with him this year, and I think he did a really good job with himself. Like, I think he really embraced the challenge of, I'm going to guard Giannis, and I'm going to guard LeBron, and I'm going to guard, everybody. And that's like, I think that the bumps he takes now, because of his demeanor, because of his makeup, are things that are going to help him massively moving forward. But I also think it's important next year for this team to be way better defensively, because it's one thing as a rookie, the first time you play these guys, the second, maybe even the third and fourth for division and in conference rivals, so you play 3 and 4 times, to go like, all right, that guy got me, darn. But like, part of the reason these guys are getting Bilal so bad in his rookie season is because he's by far the best defender on the team. He's got no help around him. The next best guy is Denny, and Denny is not as good defensively, I think, as some Wizards fans think. He's a fine NBA defender. He's not a good or certainly great NBA defender. And so I think because of that, getting a better defensive environment around Coulibaly next year to help him continue to grow should be a huge, huge priority for the Wizards.
Nah, for sure. And I think Ava was right when she said, him being able to go against some of the better players and some of the best players in the NBA is just like invaluable experience, because, again, these are like opportunities where you can go through your bumps and bruises, and they're going to mold and build you for, years to come. And if I'm Bilal, to be honest, I want to, take on the best player on the opposing team, just because that's me as a competitor. I really want to go out there and push myself. And if he's taking on this as a rookie, down the road, years to come, there's only going to be so much better he can get out of all of these experiences.
And the thing is, like, you just have to keep learning from them. And that's the hardest thing, I think, when you're getting your butt kicked every single night. And not that he has. Like, he's also done a really good job at times. It's not like he's just gotten, he's not just having a Mack truck come and, run him over every single night. He is, occasionally taken some of those Mack trucks and been like, nah, I'm here. I might be 19. I might have been playing in Division II of France a year ago, or not Division II, the youth team a year ago before February. Because remember, February 23, as Ava said, is when he got called up to the senior team over en France. But it is the kind of thing where, if you and this is kind of my thing with quarterback too. Like, this is a general sport non-specific, position non-specific, player development reality that you have to be good enough to learn. And I do think that there's also obviously a mental side to that, and this is why I think it's such a priority for the Wizards to help him next year and get him a good rim protector or some other perimeter defenders who can really handle their business, because there is like a psychological wear down where you just eventually get to the point where you're like, I know I'm trying my best and I am up for competition, but I am tired of getting my ass kicked. And that is what I fear. And, obviously some guys are more mentally strong with that. Like, their resilience is more hardened than others. But, just because one guy's a little bit more resilient doesn't mean he's actually the better player. So resilience in that way can be overrated. Set up the guy to succeed. And that goes for the resilient or the non-resilient. And I think Bilal is pretty freaking resilient. 19-year-olds tend to be. He's just like, yeah, I'm 19. I'm going to go back and try it again. But I think that, when I think about what they need to do next year, obviously offensively setting up Poole to be better successful by playing him on the ball and, continuing to try to get more offensive talent. Obviously, Bilal's offensive game should evolve this offseason and take a step. But I think defensively, not being the worst team in the league, even if you become the 20th best team in the league, will do so much for his individual development moving forward because he's not going to be on his own. Because I think the other thing, too, is then you develop bad habits, right? If you can never trust the rim protection behind you, you're not going to play scheme sound. You're going to try to do too much. And that, luckily, he has avoided that this year. He just is relentlessly doing his job, and they've done a good job, as I think, as a staff of enforcing that. But over the long term, over the course of years, having some of that pay off is just a natural part of player and human development. So that's something to keep an eye on, obviously, for Bilal Coulibaly and the Wizards next season. Coulibaly's season over, the Wizards announcing that with that wrist injury last night. All right, we'll go back to the NFL next and take a look at the best remaining free agents. There's been a couple of signings, including one former Commander off to the Buffalo Bills. We'll tell you who next on the Team 980 before Chris Wright joins us at 6:15. Final hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And I just saw Chris walk by. Chris Wright is going to join us coming up in 15 minutes. Got some nice black 11s on. The J game is strong. I got some 4s on right now.
The crazy thing is, I got on some 11s too. I got on the cherries though.
Oh, those we could have been twins. Why didn't you tell me you were wearing the cherry 11s? I got those.
I mean, to be honest, I just found them at my front door, and I was like, I need to throw on some shoes. So.
Oh, it wasn't much of a thought that went into it.
Nope.
I see. So here's what we're gonna do until we welcome Chris on here in about 15 minutes. Talk a little bit more Wizards. Let's talk NFL free agency right now. Anthony, let's play a game. You ready to play a game?
Hey. Let's do it.
So the game is, do you want that free agent? Ba-da-ba-da. Ba-da-ba-da-na-na. We can, in fact, probably just fire up the NFL music behind this instead of the game show music, Anthony. We're not going to do prices. We're not going to do anything. There's no high or low. But we are just going to take a look at the available, or the top, Anthony's listed 20 free agents. I don't know that we'll get through all of them. But we're going to look at some of the top guys. Are we interested in this player? We'll also tell you to pay off the tease, if you will, of the last segment. Casey Tuhill has signed in Buffalo. So Tuhill to Buffalo, which is not surprising that he's not back here at this point. Obviously Washington has signed a bunch of defensive ends, including some with similar enough skill sets to Tuhill that it didn't seem like he was likely to return. All right, so Mike Williams no longer on the market. That's the other, probably the biggest, I guess, free agent story of the day. And 1-year deal worth up to $15 million with the Jets. Jeez, that's got to be a games played type of situation. Because when he plays, he's worth that. When he just never plays.
Yep, that's pretty. That's been his career, literally.
Yeah.
When he's out there, because fantasy and it's messed up that I think about it, in that respect. With that regard,
is what it is.
I'm just saying that, like, when he's on your fantasy team and he's going bonkers, then he gets injured. It's a blow to the heart, man.
By the way, the other bit of NFL news today, apparently Chase Young's got like $13 million pretty much fully guaranteed from the Saints, and he's having a neck procedure of some kind.
Yeah.
So that's fun. Wonder how that affects the physical. Anyway, all right. Dolphins corner Xavier Howard is the top available guy on this list. Anthony, did you pull this list from somewhere, or is this your free agent rankings?
It's not. I more so just typed everybody's up and then.
Okay, so this is not a specific order.
Nah.
Okay, Xavier Howard, corner Dolphins. I am interested. I don't know that they have a true number one corner at this point. They have a bunch of guys who I think can compete, including the two guys they signed over the weekend. Forbes, obviously, you hope is the number one corner. BSJ has a lot of attributes that lead to him possibly being one, but also obviously a lot of flaws, which is why he hasn't been. So if you could get Xavier Howard on the right number, and especially if that number fluctuates with his health and availability in the same way that Mike Williams is probably going to with the Jets, I'm interested in Xavier Howard.
See, a couple of years ago, it would have been a no-brainer. But I just think he might be a year or two past where I would have wanted to, bring him in. He's going into his age 31 season, and
yeah,
I don't know. I think that concerns me the most.
I'm not looking for a long-term deal. I'm looking for a 1 year.
Just a 1 year?
I'm looking for a 1 year.
I would say, and maybe the summer, if we hadn't addressed that position in the draft, and we need a guy. I think he's a guy we should target if he's still out there in July or August, but not right now.
All right, so what about the next guy? Because I think you'd say a lot of the same stuff. Stephon Gilmore, obviously former All-Pro. I'm actually probably more interested in Gilmore on a 1 year because he's got the familiarity with Quinn. He's also played at such a high – like Howard was really, really good. Gilmore had a stretch where he might have been the best corner in the game. I want that guy around Emmanuel Forbes.
This one is tough because I still think he has some juice in the tank. He's 33.
He probably does still have some juice in the tank.
Last year against Terry, he played really well. I think I will be more intrigued with him immediately following the draft. I think it's too soon.
See, to me, unless you're going corner, like if you gather a second pick, and you have you do the Minnesota type of thing, and all of a sudden you're picking at 23 and a top corner's available, sure. But I don't think your CB1 is coming in the draft. Yeah. So if that's the case, you're either relying on one of these dudes you just signed, you are relying on Emmanuel Forbes, or you got to sign someone. And so that's why, to me, if you sign Gilmore, he's your CB1 tomorrow. Is he an ideal CB1 at this stage of his career? But, he's more proven than anyone you got by a lot.
Yeah, I just feel like somebody's going to be the odd man out, though, if you bring in a Gilly or a Xavier right now. We want to see Forbes out there. We just signed Michael Davis. I think Iganaba, I'm not even going to try to butcher his name. I think he's more so probably going to be suited on special teams. But BSJ, he's also still a viable option. So I think
let him compete, bro. Let him compete.
Okay, hey, look, you're right. Let them compete. You're right.
Let them compete.
Not given.
This is the thing about being a new regime. I am not married to any of these guys, Forbes included. Now, yep. I am more in a relationship with Forbes than I am anybody else because of his contract and his potential. However, I'm not married to any of them. Bring him in. Let the best man win. We got the money. Do the thing. That's where I'm at on frankly both of those guys, but I would probably bring in one, and I'd favor Gilmore. Receiver category. Bengals slot guy Tyler Boyd had so many good games. Odd man out in Cincinnati. Are you interested in Boyd?
I'm not. I think we need a guy that's going to be able to stretch the field, a bigger receiver also, and I think he's sort of kind of like Jahan Dotson to an extent. Like he's going to line up in the slot, be able to run routes, get open. I don't think he's your typical X or Z.
See, I think he's a slot guy, but I don't know that Jahan is. Just because Jahan is shifty, playing in the slot requires a level of play strength to get over the middle of the field and some of the physicality that happens inside that I don't know that Jahan has. He certainly didn't display it last year. So Boyd's intriguing. I would say the same for Hunter Renfrow, who's later on down your list. But these guys are definitely after the draft guys for me, not because I don't think they're good, but because I think the receiver market is so insane. And, you're looking for a deal, and there's plenty of receivers to be had in the draft. So I think they could use a big X receiver. I think they could use a slot guy. But by the same token, I would wait to see what I get in the draft. Like Trevor Sikkema just put out a new mock and had Florida State receiver Johnny Wilson falling to them at the top of the third round. Well, now you're playing him at X. You're playing Terry at Z and Jahan in the slot. So, Now all of a sudden that feels silly. So I think it's in part to see what you get in the draft and how you use Terry and how you use Jahan moving forward. But if you don't get something you like hopefully these guys are still available.
Do you think Jahan was misused then, I guess?
I think some of that is on misuse. I think some of that is on Jahan. Okay. I don't know that Jahan played particularly well last year in some ways that he should have. I don't think that receiver group was particularly well coached last year based off the, results. Let's see, what else we got? All right, the biggest name still available, without a doubt, is Justin Simmons, Broncos safety. Are you interested in Justin Simmons?
I am interested, and I think you brought up a great point a couple of minutes ago. This new regime isn't married to anybody. Derek Forrest, he shined, I want to say, or flashed 2 years ago. Last season didn't get off to the best start. Justin Simmons, he's a two-time All-Pro, multiple-time Pro Bowler as well. I'm intrigued.
I am also intrigued. And, if your reason for not acquiring Justin Simmons is we have Derek Forrest, all due respect to Derek Forrest, who I think is a good football player, but I'm going to need a better reason than that. Obviously, you have Jeremy Chin now, so there's one of your safeties. You have Quan Martin, who's somewhere between safety and nickel. So, let's bring Justin Simmons into the room. I'd say that one of the guys who keeps this fresh for me is new Boston College assistant coach. Congrats to my guy, Will Blackman, who was with Dan Quinn and this defensive staff in training camp last year as a coaching intern for the Cowboys. And Will has been DQ on Twitter. He's like, DQ, go get your guy, go get your guy, go get Simmons. So it makes me think that, Simmons fits the DB mold that they want. Certainly his production does. In if you can, especially with the way the safety market is, get him kind of cheap, I am definitely interested. All right, I'm gonna go one more kind of position group here, and I'm gonna name a couple of names: Jadeveon Clowney, Randy Gregory. Either of those names interest you on the pass rusher front end?
I think Jadeveon definitely interests me, but I think he's going to cost. And not to say we don't have the money to, pay for him. I just think if we're hoping to, package him and a Justin Simmons or him and a Stephon Gilmore, I think it will be a little tough. I don't know if I'm willing to give him 12 to 15.
So that's, to me, like ideal after the draft situation. If you get out of this draft without a good pass rusher, Chop Robinson, Darius Robinson, Slayton, I think is the guy's name from Alabama. Trevor had him going in the second round at pick 40 of that mock that I mentioned on PFF earlier. Like, if none of those guys are available for you in the second round and you get out of this draft and you don't have another pass rusher, I'm probably willing to spend a decent chunk of 1 year change on Clowney. Gregory probably cost you half, and they obviously know what they have in him because he was in San Francisco last year with Darryl Tapp, who's now the defensive line coach here, was the assistant last year in San Francisco. So you could see another familiarity tie there. So to me, there's kind of one more specific pass rusher, right? Like, they've got all these solid guys, your Cleveland Furls, your edge setter types. Dorrance Armstrong's a little bit of everything. Dante Fowler's got some pass rush juice for sure. But, like, there's enough room for one more, like, hey, it's third down. You and Fowler go out there and let's get after it, guy. And I would love that to be a young guy. But if it's not, and, Luvu is going to do some of that as well. Jamin will do some of that as well. But, like, give me a 4-3 edge player. And I think Clowney or Gregory could be that guy if they come out of the draft without that position filled.
I agree.
All right. That's just a quick look. Other guys that are worth mentioning, Jamal Adams, J.C. Jackson, Allen Robinson, Michael Gallup. But Gallup, I will say, is super interesting to me as a speed receiver.
Yes,
now a second year removed from the ACL. Michael Thomas, former great receiver for the Saints, but it's kind of a flash in the pan. Calais Campbell, you want to get a great mentor for John Allen in the room? Like, go get him. He's 39 years old, I think, this season, but, like, he's still got production for the Falcons last year. So those are just some of the names still out there for the Commanders and everyone else to be able to sign in free agency. All right, Chris Wright standing by somewhere around here. We will get him over and get him on the show next. This is the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Man, if this song's playing, you know we must have a special guest. Chris Wright is with us here at Capital One Arena. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Yes, the Georgetown alum has been welcomed on to the radio show in town that's hosted by the Syracuse guy.
Yes. I appreciate the hospitality from my fellow Orangemen,
Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming down. We know you. We will acknowledge your basketball knowledge. I also feel like at this point there is like a mutual misery.
It is.
For both the fact that our programs are not very good in their current iterations. Hope for the future, for sure.
Where it all starts?
The inflection point?
No, it starts with you guys leaving to go to the ACC.
Oh, yeah. No,
so
100%.
You guys really messed up the rivalry, so I'm blaming everything on the Orange. So let's be clear on that.
I mean, on behalf of my university, I will take responsibility for ruining Big East basketball.
Thank you.
Now, I will say that happened after I left. So, Anthony, it's all your fault because Anthony graduated Syracuse in, 2015?
2018.
2018.
Well, we know where the national championship resides, right?
Where's that?
In the best conference in the country.
Oh, in the Big East. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm just saying, this is where it is right now. It's home is in the Big East.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. UConn's got a chance to bring it back there.
They're really good.
The Big East is now mad at the NCAA because they only got 3 bids. So
yeah, I don't understand that.
I don't watch enough college basketball anymore to have real strong thoughts on it other than sadness. That's what, as a Syracuse alum, I have great sadness. My team doesn't even play in the conference that I want it to, and we're not very good when we play. But hopefully Red Otter can turn it around up there.
You did win the rivalry this year.
Yeah, I hope Cooley turns around. I hope that in a couple of years we're having this conversation and our programs are back top of the country and we can have a proper fight over it.
It makes college basketball better when Syracuse is really good, when Georgetown is really good, when these teams, the dominant teams are being dominant. It makes college basketball better.
For sure. Of course, coverage of March Madness starts tomorrow night. The first 4 is over on 1580 tonight, as we will have the Wizards broadcast here on the Team 980, which includes Chris as part of the post-game show. That is the predominant reason he is here, kind of subbing in for Dave. We typically have Dave at 6:15 on game nights, but he's like, why don't you guys have Chris tonight? You're here. Chris is walking around, so we're excited to have you, man. And the Wizards news of the day is unfortunately not very exciting to talk about either, and that is Bilal Coulibaly's season has come to an end. His rookie season ends with a wrist injury that they first thought was a contusion. Turns out things broken. Sucks for him. But they're going to take a nice conservative plan and get him all healed up and ready to go, hopefully maybe even for Summer League, and then we'll see about training camp following that. But if you think about Bilal's rookie season and kind of the wave that it's taken, how do you make of kind of the first huge piece of this Wizards rebuild and how he did in year 1?
Bilal had a really good year. He got to experience a lot. It's a lot of lessons he can take from year 1, just in terms of the physicality, the speed, the positions he's going to have to guard. His being able to be versatile is going to be big for him throughout his career. So just seeing his progression over time, and this is just a speed bump right now. His wrist fracture is just a speed. Hopefully, I don't want to minimize his injury, but hopefully it's just a little speed bump, but we can get over this and we can continue with the growth and development. But I really like what I've seen out of him this year in terms of his ability and willingness to defend. At a high level, he reminds me of he's in the family of like a Trevor Ariza, Tayshaun Prince, those type of guys. He has that length, he has the athleticism, he has the ability to handle the ball. I would love to see him improve his jump shot, get a quicker release, and just be confident more. And that just comes with repetitions and getting in the gym. So, it was a great building block for him to be 19 years old and get the experience. A lot of times when you come into the league at that age, you won't get the experience because you're playing behind a vet or you're playing behind somebody that's, an all-star or something like that. He was thrown right into the forest. He was thrown right into the fire. So,
and you're certainly not going to play as like, hey, you're defender 1, if you will. Like you're not going to guard the best player on the other team.
And he's guarding all of them. He's guarding Tatum. He's guarding Luka. He's guarding any big time players that come in. He's having to deal with that. So now he has a database that he can download, and he can be better fit for his year 2.
No doubt about it. I think the thing that's also great about him is he just kept coming back for more. Like he's got a tenacity, and there's like on the like if you want to put it one way, it's like tenacity and really think of that word, right? It's almost also like a little brother thing where like if you got your little brother and he just keeps coming and you're just like, get away from me. Like you need that as a defender though. You cannot get discouraged in this league. The offensive players are too good. And to watch him just be like, nice shot, Luka, nice shot, Jason, whatever, I'm going to be right back in your face the next possession,
Right.
I think shows a mentality that's really encouraging.
The mentality that he's bringing over here is European mentality. You know, they're going to play full court defense. If you're a young guy, and I played over there for a long time, if you're over there and you play on a big team, you better guard the ball full court and not say a word. So that's the mentality he kind of carried with him. In order to earn your stripes, this is how it kind of has to move. This is how you earn your stripe. If you're a young guard over there, you got to pick up full court. Make sure you get the ball to the right person. I think he brought that same mentality from Europe to here, and that's what's been giving him a foundational success. And his ability to not be afraid to guard and not be afraid to put himself out there and not get embarrassed in front of 20,000 people every night is something that shows he's tough and he's ready.
Well, that's a unique perspective you have. So let's hit on that a little bit more. Like the European mentality, and like, because it's funny, when Euro players started coming over first, like, oh, they're soft or whatever.
Right.
And I think that reputation has long died, thankfully,
Right.
because it was not accurate. But kind of the club atmosphere there,
Right.
and why I think it has translated to, or why you think, I should say, it has translated to most of the best, if not many, but I think it really is most, if I think about it, of the best players in the league right now are European players who came out of that environment. What is it about that environment that encourages that style of growth and the way that these guys, Luka, Giannis, et cetera, have been able to succeed so well in this league?
Well, overseas they have, in each country, they have, especially the best countries. You look at France, who's been a dominant in European basketball, Spain, Serbia, Greece, they all been pretty dominant in European basketball, and they have youth academies that all these guys come through. So for France, it was Tony Parker, Nicolas Batum, Boris Diaw, all of them came through the same youth academy. They all came through they came in the same time, more or less. And Bilal Coulibaly is one of those next guys that's coming through the youth academy as well, with Victor Wembanyama, as well as with, Frank Nicolina, all these guys, Eli Cope. It's a lot of guys that come through these European youth academies that are teaching them a style. If you look at the style and brand of basketball of a French player, you know a French player. If you look at the brand of basketball and style of a Serbian player, you can tell. You can tell when Milos Teodosic came to the league, he was a Serbian point guard.
Right.
Vasile Micic from Charlotte Hornets, if anybody's checked him out, he's a good point guard to check out. He has a Serbian brand of basketball. Bogdanovic, they have a very straight and military way of playing, extremely fundamentally sound. That comes from the youth academies in these individual countries, which is something that's breeding success over and over.
And I think what's unique about that, to go a little deeper on it, is
Jokic as well.
Yeah, the what is rewarded there is different than what is rewarded here.
Yeah.
And so, like, to your point, right, if you don't get the ball, like, making the right pass is how you get noticed and get more minutes.
Yes.
Right? Playing good defense, as opposed to here where it's
The
like
boxing out.
Yeah, like, hey, bro, score. And
But
like,
you know what?
I think I think that might be changing a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, I think American AAU basketball for a long time, like the high scorers were the ones who were being prioritized.
Sure.
And the incentive structure in Europe was very different.
Well, to be honest with you, AAU basketball is similar to professional basketball in a lot of ways. College basketball is similar to overseas basketball.
Yeah.
It's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap. So if you are a lot of guys, you've seen it over and over, a lot of guys that were playing in AAU basketball that had great careers in AAU were unbelievable players. Imani Bates. They struggled in college basketball. Drew Holiday did not do well in college basketball. Maybe averaged 10 points. It was a lottery pick because you know how good he is. So it's some things that just don't translate. It's some things that just don't translate. And I think AAU basketball has become such a big marketing tool and such a business, and I'm not saying it's a negative thing, that it's emulating, and so many NBA players are involved with it now, that it's emulating the NBA.
No doubt.
So Russell Westbrook has a team, Kevin Durant have a team, Bradley Beal have a team. Everybody has a team. Steph Curry got his own training things.
CP3, like, they've all got them.
Right.
Yeah.
So AAU's model is the NBA. So that's why it's seen that way, and that's why it moves that way. Now, college basketball, you got it. Now, in college basketball, you're worrying about deflections.
Right.
Charges. You're worrying about rebounds, keeping the guy on the sideline, those type of things. That's more European basketball, and you're critiqued on that. Your playing time is based off of that. So those are the differences. And you see that in European basketball. You see they're being judged on different criteria than we are being judged on.
Right.
And it's give and takes to both, because I don't think they're necessarily as good defensively as us, or because they're not as athletic. But at the same time, their offensive skill set translates to the NBA game so well because they shoot the ball so well.
Yeah, and so many of the great passers, like
Right.
a lot of well-rounded games.
Right.
There's so like this is a whole other. Frankly, it's probably not even a topic for like the radio show. It'd be like a fun podcast
It is,
discussion
yeah.
about like the development of youth athletes. Like I think it's Norway, like bans keeping score for all youth sports under like
Right.
the age of 12,
Right.
and they're killing everybody per capita in the Olympics because they're focused on development, not on winning. And when you focus on winning too young, you actually cheat the development.
Sure.
Because you're like, oh, give the ball to the big kid.
Right.
And then he just punks the
Just
because
stands
he
over
grew.
everybody and shoots it.
Yeah, he just
Yeah.
grew faster.
Right.
And like that's not actually helping the kids develop and become. But again, that's a whole different discussion. Chris Wright with us here on the Hoffman Show. This was great, bro. We'll
Thank
definitely
you,
have
man.
you back.
Appreciate
Maybe who knows? Maybe when we get into June and there's no games and everything,
We can wrap it out.
Yeah, we can.
especially because the Olympics coming up, so it's a good time to really talk some good basketball.
For sure. I mean, I'm gonna be there. So.
Yeah. Oh, you gonna be there?
Yeah, we're going. We're going to
big buddy.
Paris. We're going. I mean, not for work. We're paying. It's a lot of money, but we've been saving
It's
up.
worth it.
So,
It's worth it.
wifey and I are headed over to
Good for you.
Paris. The
Yeah.
Duolingo lessons are going terribly. If you have any French tips, somebody leave them somewhere. I can find them. All right, when we get back, we'll wrap up the show here on the Team 980. Who says that a Georgetown guy and a Syracuse guy can't get along? Chris Wright, awesome with us here on the Team 980. Great insight into kind of how Bilal Coulibaly came over and was able to succeed in his rookie year. Unfortunately, as we're live here at Capital One Arena, we will not see Coulibaly tonight or the rest of the season. He is done with that wrist injury, but a successful rookie season in what was otherwise mostly a lost season for the Wizards, but good to chop it up with Chris. Of course, he'll be on the postgame show with Glenn tonight. Dave on the call coming up here in just a little bit. About 10 minutes, we toss things upstairs to Dave in the booth. All right, Anthony. Anything else that we need to cover on the day?
Not today. Oh, I mean, we'll be at. Well, I'll be meeting you down there soon.
Yeah.
You're already down there. Do you see a lot of people filling in?
Oh yeah, no. We've had a bunch of people come up and say hi, which is great. Heckling me, only one or two. But no, people have been great saying, hey, I listen to you every day. Like, we love the station. So got a bunch of Team 980 fans that have been kind of perusing through the concourse here. But people have been flowing in over the last hour or so since the doors open. It's definitely started to pick up. Now we're out in section 106. So if you're on the way, like you're walking in the arena, and you want to say hi, listening on the free Odyssey app, then section 106, 107 is where we are right now, across from Chico, the Chinese-Korean crossover that is here in Capital One Arena, next to a taco stand. And Shaq said the tacos were very good, Anthony. So that's good.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what kind of food we got upstairs. But yeah, we'll obviously be breaking down all the equipment here. So if you're on your way in and want to say hi after the show ends, by all means, stop by. Then Anthony and I are headed up to sit with a bunch of folks from the station. So that'll be fun. Who's going to get to our seats first, Anthony? Will you be able to get out and quick metro ride over, however you're getting here? Will you be able to do that quickly before I break this stuff down and get up there?
Oh, you're definitely going to be up there before me.
You want to race?
I'm a little behind on my editing, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to have to pull my laptop out when I get upstairs to do all the video stuff.
Oh.
So I'll be watching the game. I'll be interacting with our colleagues and our friends who are up there. But I also am going to have to do a little bit of work.
I will try to be there 7:10, 7:15.
Okay, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. But as you walk around the arena, if you see a young, strapping, good-looking dude, that's Anthony Haney, everybody. He'll be on his way. We have gotten, I will say, Anthony, some very funny YouTube comments lately as we've been posting more and more stuff from the show. People do think that you are a child.
I am in tears. Is it because of the face? I look so young.
You do. Like, you have a baby face.
And then also, you can't really, see my facial.
I don't know how much the facial hair would really help you.
But,
you have a very childish, I mean that as a compliment. Like, you have a very childish face, and, that's great. Like, be young. And, it matches your demeanor and your whole energy. Like, you're a real adult. I have no doubts about that. But you have a youthfulness about you that is wonderful. It just does happen to include your face, and thus people have been commenting on the internet.
Have there been have there been any positive comments?
Yeah, I don't think it's like...
I know they're probably joking.
Yeah, I do think that they're in good fun, but it's like, bro, is your producer 15? I'm like, no, he's not 15.
15 is young, man.
He's 16, duh.
At least some people say, 17, 18, maybe a college freshman.
It's the internet. It's the internet, man.
15 is crazy.
For the record, you're 28?
I'm 27, going on 28 in July.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So that's twice in the show that I've messed up your age. Whoops. Whoops.
Okay.
He's older than you think, people. But that youthful enthusiasm, it's not going anywhere. All right, let's wrap it up. It's time for Real Things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Set into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
I just realized that I'm doing all our funny hand signals for the timing cues as Anthony and I are staring at each other in a Zoom screen because I'm at Capital One Arena and he's in the studio, and I'm sitting in the middle of the concourse at Capital One Arena where there are other people walking by. What an absolute doofus I just looked like. Anyway, Austin Reeves got dunked on the other night. That wasn't great, but it happens. It's the league. But the exchange he had when he was asked about getting dunked on, that was special enough to make it into Real Things Real People Said in Real Microphones.
It would be negligent not to ask you, Austin, about...
See, this is why I don't like you.
I know. I'm a good reporter. What happened on that first play?
Everybody's seen what happened.
Nobody had your view.
You don't want my view. Was it not a charge?
Was it not a charge?
Nobody had your view, had me crying.
That is hilarious. Who's the reporter there?
I'm not sure who the reporter was, but It was funny.
That's clearly one of the regulars.
Yeah.
Hi there. I have a 2-year-old who just is waving, and now I want to make sure I acknowledge them because we can't be ignoring the youth here at Capital One Arena. So yeah, no, that's that's a pretty funny question, and you have to have a good. That's why relationships are important in the reporter business, because you can ask questions like that. Now, Anthony, I have actually not seen this play. Reeves says charge, blocker charge.
I'm going to say block. I'm going to say block. And to be honest, Craig, it was a very impressive dunk, but it was not the dunk of the night.
No, that was Anthony Edwards.
That dude. How many times has he had the dunk of the year? Because last year, or it might have been 2 years ago, when they played the Raptors and he went baseline and basically stumped on the
That dude he is something else athletically. And he's such a good player too. Like at first I was just like, he's hyper athletic. Like how really good is he as a basketball player? I guess we're gonna find out. Like he's number 1 overall pick, but he's one of the he's a great example of what the Wizards are praying for in this draft, right?
Praying.
Is like nobody thought when Anthony Edwards came out that he was gonna be a top 5 player in the league. Right? Like I'm not misremembering that.
Well, I'm biased. I got to see this guy in high school, got to see him his 1 year at Georgia, so I thought he was going to be special. I didn't know he was going to be this special.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, he was the number 1 pick, and people didn't blink twice at Anthony Edwards being the number 1 pick, but it wasn't one of the years where people were like, oh, there's a generational number 1 pick who could be the best player on a championship team. It was like, poor T-Wolves. They're going to get, they'll get Anthony Edwards, and then they'll need to figure out a way to get someone who's better than Anthony Edwards so they can win a title. And it's like, no, Anthony Edwards might be good enough to be that guy.
Yeah.
And, we didn't know that. Obviously with Giannis, we didn't know that. And that's what the Wizards, we'll see where they pick ultimately, but, that's the hope, is that there's someone in this draft somewhere that makes you go, oh, well, the rest of the draft wasn't that good, but, our guy was. And so part of that is making people, making it right. Obviously, you need to have the skill development and the talent development people in place, the coaching staff and the roster around them to make yourselves right. Yeah. But ultimately, it doesn't. The depth of a draft only matters to an extent. You got to get your pick right. Who cares what everyone else does?
No, I agree. I agree, but that dude, man.
Yeah, that dude, Ant Edwards.
Do you think he's the most electric guy in the NBA?
I think he probably who else is in contention right now?
I think a healthy Ja Morant is.
Yeah.
Wemby for different reasons.
Wemby, Zion
and
still.
Then Zion. Yeah.
But yeah, I think night in, night out, consistency, the whole deal, and he's a better player currently than those other 2 dudes. I'll take Ant. All right, we'll see you tomorrow on the Hoffman Show.
Getting your biggest tax.